I call the member Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, for the chance to speak to the second reading of this crimes match-fixing amendment bill. We've heard, I might take this opportunity, I think it was, as Mr Sabin said, to give a hot mouth speech to this bill. But I think it's very important that we do debate this piece of legislation fully. We understand that there are time constraints because on February 14th next year, the Cricket World Cup will start in Christchurch. I think myself, like many people around the House who are sports fans, want to make sure that that tournament and the FIFA World Cup, Under-20 World Cup that is played shortly after that are held and have completely and utterly have no question marks over some of the behaviour around those events, because we want to make sure that they're showcased as best as we can for New Zealand. As part of my new responsibilities under Andrew Little's leadership, I've been given the portfolio of racing. I'll be asking for plenty of help from Sue Moroni, who has experience in that sphere. But part of that responsibility, and thank you, but part of that responsibility is for the New Zealand Racing Board and the activities of the TAB. And we want to make sure that the integrity and I guess the economic benefits of sports betting are kept, and making sure that all the proceeds that come about from sports betting go back into the codes that are covered by that. So this is a very important piece of legislation to make sure the economic benefit and the emotional attachment that New Zealanders have to making sure that sports sphere is kept intact. Mr Speaker, as I said, I was a bit of a cricket tragic when I grew up and continue to watch cricket. And as you watched tournaments like the 1992 World Cup, you were hoping and you knew that the players that were playing for New Zealand were out there doing the best for their country. But it's unfortunately a reality of international sports these days that sports match fixing has crept into the top level sports. There have been a number of cases in the last year, one I think where Lou Vincent has become the hero villain for exposing the extent of what was happening with our top level cricketers, and we need to make sure that there is integrity in our top level sports. And I think it's a sad state of affairs when we do have to try, and we do have to come to this Parliament and pass this kind of legislation. But at the end of the day, Mr Speaker, it's an unfortunate reality of the world we live in. Mr Speaker, sports match fixing is at its most nastiest when people who have the ability to make profits have relationships with people who can affect the outcome. And that is where the value is for what you would call match fixers, because they will have relationships with the people within the sports teams who can either bowl or no ball, bowl wide, and for sports betting, or be able to manipulate the outcome of a match. And that's an interesting thing to look at when you look at the anatomy of match fixing, when someone can manipulate the outcome to get benefit. And I guess that's what we've seen in the reports that have come out this week, because we had officials in John Key's office, his Deputy Chief of Staff, have access to information because he held that position from the SIS, passed that on to another staff member in Mr Key's office, who then went to someone he had a relationship, Cameron Slater, to manipulate an outcome. So there's a strange irony in what we're doing here today, because that government over there is quite happy to manipulate an outcome when any other fair-minded Kiwi.
Order. If you're going to, sorry, the member knows the subject of this debate. The previous speaker from his party made a passing comment. If this member continues to direct the flow of his speech along these lines, he will be in breach of the rules of the House, and I asked him to come back to the point in hand.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, for your guidance. I was just coming to the end of my point where any other New Zealander would call that cheating. So, Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, Kiwis don't like cheating. They find it abhorrent. It's not the way that we do things. It's not cricket. So when they see people manipulate situations to their benefit, when they shouldn't have been doing that, they don't like that. They don't like it at all. Whether it be sporting at the top level on Lancaster Park, here at the stadium, or whether it be at their own sports grounds watching their kids play. They don't like it. And they certainly don't like it in their politics too. So, Mr. Speaker, this goes to integrity. This goes to whether or not this is fair. And New Zealanders will be watching these events that are going to be happening early in 2015 and subsequent events that this piece of legislation will cover. And they will say, if you jimmy the system, if you work it to benefit you, and it goes against what the rules are set out, then it's not a good look. And they will make judgments, Mr. Speaker. They will make judgments, as they have on sports people, as they will on their kids who might play the rugby or on the weekend, or adults who are participating in sports. Or their politicians, Mr. Speaker. Or their politicians. Because if there's one thing about Kiwis, they like people to get a fair go. That's why the show Fair Go was so popular for all these decades. Kiwis fundamentally believe in the notion of getting a fair go. And when they see someone on the other side who isn't getting a fair go, they seem to think that the people who aren't giving people a fair go shouldn't be there anymore. Should be given the red card, I should say. Because I think that's what most Kiwis would think about. So when we're out there thinking of laying a bet on a Cricket World Cup game, or on the FIFA World Cup, we'll lay that bet thinking that everyone is playing by the rules. Everyone is playing by the rules. But maybe when you either lay a bet or cast a vote next time, you'll know who's playing by the rules or not. Because there'll be maybe a track record, maybe like we have in the Turf Digest or the form book, or the book you get at the races. You'll see what that horse, what that team, or what that party has done for the last 3 years. And say, okay, given that form, am I going to back this party, am I going to back this horse, or am I going to back this team anymore? And I think you'll see in 3 years' time, some horses will have done well, and some horses would have faded away. Mr. Speaker, this does go down to integrity around our sporting sector. I think, as Mr. Mallard said earlier in his contribution around the select committee process, it could have been tighter, because there are codes within specific sports where we can make sure that those align closer to the sporting bodies and what is in this legislation. Because we do want to make sure we do have integrity around this process of sports betting. Because there are a lot of proceeds that go from sports betting into the sports that we have that are run by the TAB, the likes of cricket, the likes of rugby, the likes of rugby league. But Mr. Speaker, I know you've just blown the buzzer on me, and I will call to a close soon. But Mr. Speaker, I do want to call back to what is important about this. It is about integrity. It is about whether or not we trust sports people or people who operate horses, or maybe our politicians, to act with honesty and integrity. And I think as you look at that form book, you want to back a horse or back a team that's doing things properly, playing by the rules, and you won't put your money on a team that has run the vilest smear campaign out of the Prime Minister's office for the last 6 years.